Hello everyone, my name is Ucher, founder and CEO of GSEO.
Hello everyone, my name is Karthik, co-founder of GSEO.
Jenna Jokani is a Stanford University student majoring in pre-law and neuroscience, combining her passion for legal studies with a deep interest in cognitive science. She has had leadership roles, including president of Stanford Marketing and director of publishing at the Stanford Undergraduate Law Review, and has gained valuable experience through internships at prestigious law firms. So yes, we are here today with this amazing person. Without further ado, Jenna, could you please introduce yourself briefly to our audience?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Jenna Giocani. I'm a junior at Stanford University. I'm studying political science as my major, and I'm minoring in symbolic systems, which is one of Stanford's interdisciplinary majors. And my concentration is neuroscience. Some of my personal interests include, law, marketing, consulting, business. And some of the main organizations that I'm a part of here on Stanford campus is the Pre-Law Society, the Undergraduate Law Review, and then also Stanford Marketing Group as well. And I'm happy to elaborate more on those later on.
All right, yes, and we'll dive into our first section of the interview, which will be all about your academic and high school experiences. So, as you just mentioned, you are majoring in political science and having a deep interest in neuroscience, I believe. So, can you
Yes.
tell us more about like what inspired you to pursue this combination of majors at Stanford?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a unique combination. Not very
Mhm.
many people decide to combine the two interests. I came into Stanford fully thinking I was going to go directly to law school, that, I was
Mhm.
very a humanities like type person in high school. All my favorite classes were like writing classes, reading based classes. And so, kind of coming into Stanford, I knew I wanted to go to law school and that's what I was interested in, but I wanted to explore that in different avenues. And it
Mm.
took me a couple of years to realize what that really actually looked like for me. So, I came in, I knew I wanted to do law, but, what type of law? So I thought about
Mm.
it and I was really interested in corporate law, just combining learning about the legal field with, learning about different businesses as well. And I knew that I was passionate about learning and working in various fields and not just working for one company in their legal scope. So then that kind of led me to see, what are some more technical aspects or technical realms I can explore law in. And so I came across my lab, and they kind of introduced me to the intersection between neuroscience and law.
Mm.
And that kind of looks like, looking at why certain individuals make certain decisions. For example,
Oh.
like individuals on a witness stand, sometimes they accidentally lie or they say things that, they remember, but they're recalling that memory incorrectly. How can we study that? How can we learn more about that? And I think having that perspective was something that I was really interested in exploring more.
Hmm. Cool. That's very interesting. And what I can understand from your answers is that you had an interest in law before attending Stanford. So, was there any particular experience that sparked your interest in law during your high school, maybe?
Yeah, I think that, in high school, people are always going to ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you
Mm.
want to do in the future? And I think it took me a really long time to realize what I really wanted to do. But what my interest in law kind of came from me thinking about what I was good at and what I wanted to continue to do in the future. So, I knew that I was really good at these reading classes, these writing
Wow.
classes. I knew that, I liked problem solving, strategic thinking. And, there's not very many careers that really go past like that humanities path in using those skills. So I thought law was super interesting and something I wanted to pursue. And how I decided that something that I wanted to continue to do in the future was just gaining a lot of experience or as much professional experience as I could in the legal field in high school before coming to Stanford.
All right, that's interesting. And just like a personal question though, like, was there any
Yeah.
particular experience or anything that you have done during your high school to increase your interest in law? Because I believe like some people
Yeah.
watching this interview might be interested in law field area.
Yeah, of course. I think that, my three main experiences in high school that really shaped or helped me decide whether or not I was interested in pursuing law was firstly, I was fortunate to do a couple of internships at a couple prestigious law firms in Thailand, where I'm originally from and where I went to high school. And I think that that was super helpful because I pretty much just got thrown into the deep end, really figuring out what it's like to work in a law firm, what it's like to just be surrounded by these individuals who have been like doing this as a career every single day. And I think it was less about, learning those skills and learning those experiences, but more so having the ability to talk to those people, go into the office for all those hours every
Mm.
single day and just like kind of living a day in the life of what it would look like. I guess on the easier side, if I were to go into law. And then on top of that, I was also fortunate to be able to have a lot of clubs and organizations in my high school. There wasn't really that many in terms of individuals who are interested in pre-law, which gave me the motivation to want to start more pre-law clubs as like, a high school student. And I can maybe touch on those more if you're interested in, but I started an organization called Law Insider, which is like a law blog to help students who are interested and learning more about the legal field even from high school all around the world. Also like the International Youth Law Conference, and I did a little bit of mock trial as well.
Cool, cool. And one of the things that I found very interesting or rather like surprising from your LinkedIn was that you're from International Bangkok High School, which I was like, oh wow,
Yes.
that's incredible because we are actually from a school based in Indonesia, another Southeast country. So can you walk us
Mhm.
through like your academic college admission process, like from International Bangkok High School to go to all the way to California and Stanford? Like, how was the process of college admission like? Can you share more about it?
Yeah. Of course. And, I think that it's always, I think coming from an international school and an international background, it's always super difficult. I think for me, I was, neither of my parents had ever gone to a university in the US. My mom went to university in Thailand and my dad went to university in Canada. So I had absolutely no idea what the application process was like whatsoever. I had a couple of like resources at school. I had like my college counselor, but really, I was fully figuring it out like step by step. And I guess what that process really looked like for me, I was pretty unsure about where I wanted to go to school country wise. I was super interested in exploring, universities in the UK, but also like
Mm.
super interested in going to university, of course, in the United States as well. And so really, I just kind of threw my hat in everywhere. I really got an early start on, just developing, okay, these are the type of schools that I want to go to, what schools out there offer, the majors or the programs that I'm interested in. And so before I think even thinking about how my application fits or what my application looks like, I started off with thinking, what schools even do I want to apply to? What schools offer the
Mhm.
programs that I'm interested in? Just because there's so many schools out there and that is so hard. And, making sure that I had that list before I even think about shaping my application, just because your application for every school will look very different. An application to Stanford will
Yes,
be
it
like
does.
geared very differently than one for like, let's say like London School of Economics.
Mhm.
So making
Oh.
sure I had that list before I applied. And then in terms of the application itself, I really wanted to make sure that the key or the best of pieces of advice that I definitely got was just make sure that you and your personality and you as an individual shines through on your paper before any of your academic interests or anything like that. So if someone like on the street that knows you is walking by and they see your application on the floor, they should be able to read your application and know that it's you. Like that is how much you should have your own personality shine through in your application.
All right, that's interesting. That's interesting. And can you also share your experience at the International School of Bangkok and like how do you think they have shaped your academic interests and your career goals?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, attending International School Bangkok or ISB really did help me in terms of shaping my college application, just because the school, I was fortunate to go to a school that would provide me a lot of resources in terms of college counseling. Every student at ISB was able to be given their own personal college counselor. And, I'd be able to go and meet with her to be able to talk about like all this research that I did, or, I'd be able to go back and forth with her about essays that I did or essays that I wrote and see, what are some things that I can tweak, what are some things that I can change. I also think going to an international school, I think you guys can probably relate to this. It exposed me to so many different perspectives that I think not a lot of people will get if they go to a school, let's say like a big country like the US. Going to an international school, I was able to be exposed to people from literally all around the world, people who've had experiences like living in like 5 or 6 different countries at the age
Mm-hmm.
of like 17. And, that gave me a really worldly perspective and a perspective that I was able to show in my application that, yes, I'm academically prepared. Yes, I'm able to present myself well, but I'm also able to be so adaptable and talk to people from so many different places. And I think that that's a skill that is really rare to find and a skill that is really useful to shine through in your application.
Well, thank you so much for the tips, I guess. And from your LinkedIn page, I was able to also find that you won this like psychology award at International School of Bangkok. Can you tell us more about the work or any project that you had worked on to receive this award?
Yeah, for sure. So I received the psychology award at ISB at the end of my senior year, so right before I graduated. And how I basically, I guess, worked my way towards getting that. Firstly, was just doing well in my psychology classes. I knew that there was awards coming up at the end, so I really wanted to make sure, I increased like my academic standing in those classes. But I think on top of that, also when I talked to the individual or my professor or teacher that gave me the award, he kind of talked about my work in terms of how I would apply my thinking from that class to other projects that I was in. So I did the International Baccalaureate or the IB diploma. And
Mm,
so as part of that, you have to, do like internal assessments or projects outside of your classwork and outside of your tests. And so the way that I took what I learned from the class and applied that to my project, I tried to, yes, do follow the actual, I guess, steps that everyone follows, but what can I add to that to make it unique? What can I add to that to make it different? And I think that, I replicated a study that was like super famous, but then I think the way that I interpreted the implications of that study and, my further directions of where possible research like this could go was something that definitely made me stand out. And I think something that allowed me to get that award.
wow, that's incredible. And though you have mentioned it previously before, could you also like elaborate more on your experience, like especially your leadership experience as a founder of the International Youth Law Conference during your high school period? And how did this
Yeah.
experience influence your passion for law?
Yeah, for sure, of course. So I started the International Youth Law Conference, I think my junior year of high school, so my third year of high school, I had already started, being in all these like law clubs like in my high school itself. But I was like, well, this international perspective is so important. I want to be able to work with other people on this, seeing if there's other people around the world who are interested in doing the same thing as me. And so, like the summer of my sophomore year, I'm thinking like, how do I do this? How do I like find all these people who are interested in these things? And I'm like, why don't I start a law conference? All these law
Mm,
conferences are in person and for these like people who are already in law school, people who are already, in college. Why is that not an option already for high schoolers or people who, are of our age? And so I really got to thinking and kind of building the conference together. And I wanted the conference in total to, look like helping. Sorry, there's like a really loud car alarm going outside. Let me know if you can't hear me. But yeah, what I wanted that to look like basically was just people wanting to join to A, learn more about law, B, develop skills in like mock trial and analysis and problem solving, but also people just hearing from industry professionals and people who are in the legal field from different areas around the world. So it took a lot of, I think, work, and it also helped me see like, is this something that I'm even interested in? We had to put together a committee of people. I interviewed, I think, about like 50 people who were interested in
oh,
like leadership positions
oh,
for the law or for the conference. And so we ended up having a board of about 10 to 15 people from 5 different countries around the
wow.
world, like Thailand,
Ooh.
Singapore, South Africa. Trying to think of a couple more. I think we had some from Korea as well. So definitely like really
Lovely.
international board. Yeah. And then kind of like on top of that, after developing the board, then I got to work together with them for just like sourcing different legal professionals around the world. So, we were able to seek out different people that wanted to share their passions, share their stories about law to people who are in high school, who are even thinking about possibly pursuing this in college. Um, and then,
Oh.
I was able to hear from all these people. So we had a couple managing partners from law firms around the world. We had like students from Harvard Law, Cambridge Law, kind of get a very
Yeah.
diverse perspectives of individuals. And then, hearing from them and really learning their experiences helped in building that also, I think helped really shape and confirm my interest in law. At first I knew like a lot
Mm.
about law just from TV shows like Suits, for example. But I was like,
Uh,
is that a real accurate representation? So being able to be a part of all these organizations and all hearing from all these people gives you that unique experience, I think, that I wouldn't have gotten elsewhere, and really helped shape if I was interested in law or not.
was it an accurate interpretation though? Because I'm a big fan of those Suits series, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's as accurate as it could be. Like, I mean, in terms of, I
Mm.
guess, the vibe,
Okay.
when I went to go intern at a couple of offices, it literally looked exactly like the Suits office. So they got that correct. But I think in terms of,
Mhm.
the workload and what like the cases actually look like, not every single
Mhm.
one of them is probably going to be as exciting as, the ones that Mike and Harvey do. They're probably more so, there's a lot more on the back end that I think that they don't show in terms of like, there's so much preparation and so much research that goes in behind even before you're meeting with the client. When you're meeting with the client, it's not as like casual, I think, as they make it on the shows. It's definitely a lot more, very professional, very like, here's like a bunch of work that I've outlined for you. Like, where can we go from here? Um, but I think in terms of, the atmosphere and the vibe that you get from the show, it's very similar. I think just workload is different.
All right, interesting. And you also mentioned that you have networked with a lot of people for your law conference project, like those from South Korea, South Africa, I believe. Are you still in touch
Yeah.
with them?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think the best thing about being able to meet and network with all these people is being able to ensure that you can reach out to them again in the future. And I think to me, how I do that is I continuously try to check in as much as I can. A lot of the people that I've met, or a lot of like the industry professionals that I've met, they also are really curious to learn about students as much as you're interested in learning about them. At the end of the day, you're a future hire that they could possibly have. So they want to understand like your trajectory. They want to understand how they could possibly recruit you in the future. And I think that that's like the best mindset to have um, when thinking about how you can stay connected with these people, is that like you're not always just taking from them, but you're also allowing them to learn about you and learn about your interests and how, they can futurely like connect with people like you. Um, and so when I first meet them, that's the conversation that I have, trying to set, I don't want to just like network with you to just like meet with you once and then get your name and then like kind of leave. Like, I want this to be a continuous conversation. So setting that as a precedent first. And then, just checking in every like now and then, maybe like with a lot of my past bosses that I've worked with in law firms, I like email them and just update them on like my progress every like 6 months to a year or so, just to
Cool.
catch them up. And then like they always respond being like, so nice seeing your progress, like if you ever want to come back in, we'd love to talk to you more. But yeah, just telling them and continuously checking in, but also keeping the conversation going both ways.
I believe you have done a lot of like networking experiences, I believe. Can you like share us a little bit about like tips on how we can do it more effectively? Because I believe like some
Yeah,
tips on communication and networking, there must be something for us to learn.
yeah, 100%. I think that the way to do it is honestly to just not be embarrassed and not be scared that like they're going to judge you or they're going to think of you weirdly. I know that like, when you're like 16, 17, like it's so nerve-wracking going up to like somebody who's like the head of like a Fortune 500 company, or like, the
Mhm.
CEO of some company that you're working with, and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, why is this like young kid coming to talk to me? But honestly, like I think telling yourself and getting over that idea that, that's going to happen, and like understanding like they want to learn from you as much as you want to learn from them. And then in terms of tips and tricks, I think, all these people will always be approached by someone who's super professional and super, like gotten their stuff together. But I think that what really allows them to be, or like for you to be memorable, is for you to have a good balance of like, you are someone who's professional, you're someone who's able to very much clearly communicate with them, but you're someone who lets your own personality shine through. Sometimes it's like really easy for you to be like super rigid and super like quiet and like calm and collected when you're talking to people like this. But the way to stand out and the way to be memorable is, be an enjoyable person to talk to. Like these people talk to so many people a day. They want to have a refreshing conversation. And if you go in with that mindset, I think that that's the best way to stick out, stand out, and then build like a really great network.
Well, that's a great piece of advice. Thank you. And
No
Karthik, do you have
worries.
any further questions?
No, I think that will be all for the academics in high school. So thank you so much, Jenna, for your answers. They were quite beautiful and honestly quite valuable advice as well. So thank you so much for that.
No worries.
All right. Next up, we'll be moving on to university and internships. So this will be quite interesting to learn from you about all your experience so far. So first, we'll start off with your position as president of Stanford Marketing. So that's quite a
Yeah.
high position. And what were some key challenges that you faced while managing projects for Microsoft and Spotify, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, for sure. So I joined Stanford Marketing Group my freshman year of college, or here at Stanford. And I've enjoyed every single bit of it. Maybe a little bit of context of what that group is. Stanford Marketing is a pre-professional business consulting marketing group here at Stanford. And what we try to do is we try to give consultants who work with us real world experiences working on real world product projects for clients. Um, and so I was fortunate enough my last year to become a project manager for Stanford Marketing Group, and I project managed a project for Spotify and then one for Microsoft as well. And in those projects, I think my greatest challenge was also, my thing that I like the most about being, in this organization, which is I think the fact that, as I said earlier, I came in like super with, a very humanities like mind. Like I wasn't really capable of doing any like technical, like I couldn't do math questions on the spot or anything like that. And now I'm like put on this project to run for a tech company and understand, like their algorithm or something like that. And so as a project manager, I had to be like fully briefed. I had to be fully prepared and know the client pretty much as well as they do. And so it was just, the challenge was throwing myself into that deep end, into a zone that I'm uncomfortable in and didn't know, and really working my way around telling myself that like, you can approach this from a different perspective. You don't need to approach it from the way that like a computer science major would. You can use your skills and use your background to be able to better understand the situation and still create just as good of a deliverable or a final project for the client.
I see. I see. It's quite an interesting story. And within your time as a consultant for Stanford Marketing, you obviously worked on various different types of projects. As you mentioned, one with Microsoft, one with Spotify. Could you give us an example of one project that really stood out for you? Something that you really remember because of your experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think one project that really, really stood out to me was my first ever project that I was on. Of course, I'd love to say that like the biggest project like Microsoft and Spotify were super cool, but I think my favorite project had to be the very first project that I was on. And it was for a small chocolate company in Bali called Jungle Gold Chocolate Bali. They were based in Bali and they were trying to expand into the US market. So they tasked Stanford Marketing Group with understanding, how can they change markets? How can they go from this Bali market to the US market? And then they tasked us with pretty much doing their entire marketing plan. And that includes like, redesigning their packaging. Where do they sell? Do they sell in like, a low end or high end grocery store? What types of flavors appeal to the US consumer? And all those different things we were in charge of researching, finding, and delivering to them. And I think that what I really loved about that project and what made it super memorable to me was that we got to work directly with the CEO of the company. They really cared about, the recommendations that we had, the research that we had. And that really gave me a taste of what it's like to do a real world project for a client that cares about the research and the deliverables that I'm delivering. And then I think what made it the most memorable was, I'm making this packaging, whatever, like I've, done all these recommendations. I've delivered it to the client. There's not really much more I can do on my end. I'm like flying into the airport all of a sudden, and I like look on the shelves like the chocolate souvenirs, and I see our packaging of our product that we did on the shelves, and I was like, wow, I did this project a year ago, and like the effects of my work I'm able to see in real life in person. And that's what it is for all Stanford Marketing Group projects and things that make, I think, us really stand out from other different like pre-professional organizations.
Wow, wow, quite interesting. And it's really, really nice to hear. You brought something from Bali to all the way to the US. That was a
Yeah.
huge, huge accomplishment. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's quite nice to hear. Okay. Other than the Stanford marketing, you were also an intern at Blumenthal, Richter and Summit, which I believe is a law firm. So could you
Yes.
explain about what experience you had in this firm and how did it influence your career trajectory?
Yeah, for sure. So I interned at Blumenthal, Richer, and Smith. I think my summer of my freshman year in college. So I had just had 1 year of university experience. I was still super interested in law, wanted to try it out. And so I reached out, and I can go into maybe the recruiting process if you guys are interested, but I reached out, and then I was hired as an intern for them. And then kind of what that process looked like or what my internship really looked like was broken down into three different parts. So the first part was understanding, the firm really needed help with their like law publishing or like legal like news publishing. So coming from Stanford and having a really strong writing and like English background, I was able to take those skills and market myself and say like, hey, like I'm so able to help with this. I can do background research about all these laws that are coming out that you guys want to advertise or tell to your clients. Like I can definitely get to doing that. And so a lot of my internship was based on, writing those articles and sending them out to clients. The second part of my internship was also, just understanding, working with a lot of like problem solving. So, of course, I had no like law degree coming in, so I wasn't able to advise on like, here's like the law that you should use to solve this problem. But instead, I was coming in with a lot of previous background industry knowledge and also a lot of problem solving and like quick thinking skills. And so, whenever, a client would have a meeting, I would be asked to join the meeting. I'd take notes and then, I'd meet with the managing partner or the partners on the project afterwards and give them my ideas of like, these are the things that I think like from my perspective would be really cool to focus on and look at. And then I also did a lot of like looking at like client briefs and, finding like small nitpicky things that maybe like they messed up on and they needed to change. And the third part and final part of my internship was also my firm was super interested in learning about like tech, AI, specifically ChatGPT in the workforce. And because I went to Stanford for a year, I understood a lot about that. Just being surrounded by the tech in the area and like people who were learning more about the use of AI in the workforce. And so they tasked me with learning a lot about that and bringing my knowledge and presenting it to them. And I presented to the entire firm about that topic, which was super cool, a little nerve wracking, but yeah, that's kind of what my internship experience looked like.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. That's really amazing to hear, especially since, as you mentioned, yeah, you involved so many different things, and then there was AI as well, which you were able to talk about and present to your law firm as well. That's quite interesting
Yeah.
to hear. Okay, perfect, perfect. Last question for the internship section. So you're also a communication chair at the Stanford Free Law Society. How did this position help you develop your leadership skills and as well as your communication skills?
Yeah, for sure. So I joined the Stanford Pre-Law Society again in the fall of my freshman year, just because I wanted to be surrounded by other people who were interested in like the law school as well, or potentially going to law school as well. And I found a great community there and a very supportive community, which led me to want to have a more leadership role in the club. So last year I was the chair of communications, and then this year I'm the chair of external programming. Um, but in that process, what I learned about leadership and communication, I think, is like you can't do everything yourself. You have to really be able to learn how to delegate. And I think that's the most important thing that people who are really, I'm someone who wants to do like high achieving things. I'm someone who like likes to be in control, but sometimes you're not able to maximize like the things that you want to do or maximize, your potential if you're only like relying on yourself. And so I think what I learned most about my leadership skills is learning how to delegate to other people and being able to trust that other people are able to help you and want to push you further in your work as well. And that all comes from, I think, finding a really good community. And in terms of communication skills, being the chair of communications, I had to send out like tens of 20 emails to like 150 people mailing lists like every single week. So I really had to like get on top of my organization, get on top of, making sure that like everything is planned. Like I can't send a wrong email to 150 people and take it back. So really taking the time to understand that like, I can work through, I can take my time. There's other people there to help me. And like not only communicating to other people, but I think communicating to myself that like you can take a break, you can, delegate. And I think that that's what I learned the most about communication and leadership in my role.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Um, Wuchal, do you have any other questions for Jenna regarding internships?
No, I don't have any further questions. I think we can move on to next section.
Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. Great. So the last section is going to be about your research experience. So
Hmm.
I went through your LinkedIn profile and I found out that you're currently working as an undergraduate research assistant at the Stanford Memory Lab. So could
Yes.
you tell us more about, your research focus and any significant findings that you have found so far?
Yeah, for sure. So I started as an undergraduate research assistant in this lab the spring of my sophomore year, so early or mid last year. My research is focusing, or my mentor's research that I'm assisting on is focusing on looking at memory, specifically prediction error. So kind of breaking that down a little bit, you have predictions, or everybody has predictions about what's going to happen in the future. Let's say like tomorrow I think it's going to rain. I have a high prediction that's going to rain. But a lot of the times our real life experiences don't really match with our predictions that we have. And how does that impact our memory of that day or that situation later on in the future? And so that's kind of what my research was looking at, breaking down into the actual design of like the research, I guess, that I was doing or that I am currently doing. We have a lot of people remember different mnemonic pairs. So they have like remember a word and then they remember a picture and a pairing of those two, and they study a couple of different versions of that. And then, later on they're tested to see like, okay, here's a word, here's a picture. Does that picture and that word what I showed you earlier, or is it something different? Trying to see if there's like if they recognize whether or not there's a mismatch or there's a prediction, there's an error. And then 2 days later, we'll bring them back. And what we want to see is, what people remember and what people don't remember. So, if there was a mismatch or like if the words and pictures didn't match and you ended up correctly identifying that, do you remember that picture later on, like better on 2 days later or not? And some findings that we've found is that, yes, it is, true that if people have a prediction and then, they recognize that that prediction didn't come true, they remember that situation 2 days later, and they remember it better later on. Some other findings that we found that is really cool is that during this whole process, we're looking at people's pupils. So recording their eyes to see if that can be a measurement for memory and how people or why people are able to remember certain things over others. And we found that, when people are exuding more cognitive effort, which means, when people are taking more time to be able to remember something, their pupils are larger. And so that means, they're really going back into their memory and trying to remember something. Whereas if it's something that's like a lot easier for someone to remember, then their pupils are a lot smaller and a lot like less constricted. And I think the larger implications of that can be applied to any field. For example, like let's say like someone's like recounting a story and you're trying to see what parts of their story are real, what parts of their story are made up. We're actually possibly able to look at pupil as a measure of that. And I think that's like a pretty significant and pretty cool finding that we found.
Definitely, definitely. The way you correlated memory to pupils, that's really, really interesting match. And wow, nice finding.
Yeah,
Very
thank you.
interesting. Perfect, perfect. Okay. So aside from working at Stanford Memory Lab, You are also a research fellow, a neuro undergraduate research fellow at the Woodside Neuroscience Institute. So, could you explain to us a bit more about, what was this role and what has been the most exciting aspect of your research?
Yeah, for sure. So, I was an undergraduate research fellow at Woodside this past summer. So, I stayed on campus over the summer, kind of exploring my research more. And so, I guess what that looked like is I was still pretty much doing the exact same research at the exact same lab. I was just also learning and collaborating with other labs and people from working at other labs here at Stanford over the summer in the Neuroscience Institute. And I think that, what I learned from that, or what I think was like most interesting and what I found most significant was just how applicable my findings were to other fields and other areas. I'm like sitting here and presenting about, pupils and memory and, prediction errors, but then, the poster down like the hall when I'm talking to like people and like this program was looking at like how can you, like like generate certain cells that have died in the heart. It was just something that like I would have never heard of, I would have never understood. And I think and they eased us into it in such a, understandable manner that, even having no biology background or no chemistry background, I was able to understand their research, able to understand what they were doing. And that sparked a conversation of just, this is might be a field that I was interested in. And I think that was probably what I learned that was most significant from that process, given that I did, pretty much the exact same research.
I see, I see, I see. Okay, okay, perfect. And from these research experiences which you got, would you be able to provide any tips or any advice for high school students who are just breaking into the field of research?
Yeah, 100%. Honestly, I think my biggest piece of advice is just try to get yourself out there. I know it's so difficult to find opportunities, especially for like people in high school who want to explore research and who want to, be able to like look at that further. But I think, as you guys did, like your guys' self, make opportunities for yourself if there's no opportunities out there. Don't feel scared to, want to push the boundaries or want to like do something that you're interested in just because you're young or just because you don't have any previous experience. Like the only way that you get experience is just by going out and getting it. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice. In terms of more practical like tips, I think it's always like dedicate some time to literally go on like a Google deep dive. Like I remember in high school when I was super interested in like these research positions, I would just Google like, law journal accepting like high school students or like, neuroscience journal. Like just go on a deep dive and see like what journals or what like programs are accepting people and are, looking for more research like that you can help with. Some of the ones that come up off the top of my head, I did a paper for the I think it's ISSCY, the ISSE journal. That one is a really great one that take publications from high school students. The John Locke, like essay Oxford program, they take applications from students. There's a couple other ones out there. If you just go on like a Google deep dive, like you will be able to find opportunities all around the world that are taking, applications and like research papers from like students from everywhere. And I think also touching back on that international aspect earlier, having that different background is really something that they look for in these journals. A lot of people who are submitting essays and papers to these journals are people who are from, the US, the UK, but like they don't get very many from like Thailand, from South Korea. So being able to just market yourself and put yourself out there and drop your hat in pretty much like anywhere that you think would be interesting.
Okay, okay, okay. I see, I see. Quite valuable advice again from you over there. And you mentioned that you published your research, and publishing research is an
Yeah.
entirely different thing. So, did you face
Mhm.
any challenges while getting your research published?
Yeah, I think that it was so my paper that I published was about, in the ISSCY journal was about, like possible discrimination within the employment process or like legal barriers and looking at like discrimination in the employment process. And I
Okay,
think that for that, the challenges, that I faced was just finding somebody honestly to be interested in this article that I wrote about. I submitted the same article or the same paper, I think, to maybe 5 to 10 different journals out there. So like
oh,
it really isn't an easy process to find somebody, who wants to be able to like talk about the things that you're interested in, or, publish the things that you're interested in. But like, I think what I learned from that is there is an audience out there somewhere. And I think in terms of the actual publication process itself, the most difficult part for me was being able to see my own research from a different perspective, from a different light. You have this like beautiful, fully fleshed out paper that you've worked for like months on. You can't really see it in any other way. You're like, this is perfect. Like, what else can I possibly change about this? But when you give it to the people who are going to publish it, they're going to have edits. They're going to want you to change it. I know that for me, they wanted to like change like my very last conclusion part to be like, well, this is the conclusion that you got, but I think that this is a better conclusion. And for me to have to accept that and change that, I think was really hard for me to be able to see it from that perspective. But I think it allowed me to really be able to think on my feet and think adaptively.
Okay. All right. Perfect. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question from this research experience sector. With all the experience that you have, even with publishing a research paper, what do you see, or how do you see your research journey in the future directed at? I mean, especially in the, I'd say in the field of law and economics and neuroscience.
Yeah. For sure. I think that, I never was really like fully like thinking about joining a lab when I came to Stanford. I never really knew that like research was something that I fully wanted to pursue. I knew it was just something that I was interested in. But in terms of thinking about how it fits into, my future plans, I think that having this background or working in this lab is something that has been really, or the memory lab has been something that's been very valuable to me. It's not just taught me skills about how to conduct research, but also has taught me skills and information that I can take into various fields. Like, I think it's very rare for people to say, I'm interested in law school, I want to go and work as a lawyer. But I
Mm.
also understand like the neuroscience perspective of it. I understand, like, I've conducted research about why people think these ways and like why people are able to act a certain way in that field. And I think that that's really valuable for me and something that I want to continue on with learning more about. I've just scratched the surface of the intersection in this field. And so I will continue to be working with this lab for at least until I graduate, and then taking that information and, trying to expand on it more in whatever, like, job or field that I end up doing after I graduate.
All right. Perfect. Great. That was an
Yeah.
amazing interview with you.
Awesome.
Kuchal, do you have any extra questions for Chenna?
Just like a one personal question, I would say, because like a lot of people watching this interview might never have experienced like what it's like to be a Stanford student. So
Yeah.
can you like
Yeah.
share morals about like how it is like to be a Stanford student? Maybe like inside the campus, or it can be just general things about California. Can you share more about those
Yeah.
experiences?
Yeah, of course. I'd love to. I think that, that's super helpful because I know when I was applying, I literally was like, well, yeah, Stanford's a great university and like, there's so many things out there, but what is it actually like to be a student there? I think kind of some tips, or I guess like talking about my experience, I think definitely, the norms of like, and the culture here is different in America than like what I was used to, in China. I think people here have a very like work hard culture, everyone is super like driven, motivated. And I think that that's a good switch. I think I came from, my high school, everyone was a little bit more like laid back and, people were like interested in their passions, but weren't really going for the things that they were interested in. And so I think here the difference is, people are interested in things, people want to, start a startup, people want to be able to, start these clubs. And it's really nice to be surrounded by people who motivate you and people who push you. In terms of California in general, it's super nice here. I think a big thing to consider about, where you're applying to university is where it's located. I've learned that I cannot do the cold whatsoever. So I'm very happy that California is super warm. And I think, I can always like go out like the sun is shining, I don't have to worry about snow and it's like October, November, December. So I think that's another big thing. And then also I think kind of about how Stanford is like as a student is I think it's a really good mix of like, you learn so much in your classes and you learn like from all these crazy professors that are at the top of their field and everything. But I think I've learned more from the students than I have learned in my
Yeah.
classes. You know, I think I learned a lot about like, economic principles or things like that in my classes, but how I learn about, what's out there in the world, how to communicate with other people, what people are thinking about doing in the future. That teaches me so much more. And I think the network of people that you gain here is what really sets Stanford apart and what really makes me enjoy it. And, allows me to be happy about being in California and being so far away from home.
To be honest, my dream number one university is actually Stanford, like right now. And your
Oh
stories
my
are
gosh, no
actually
way.
making it, like the strongest candidate, like strongest dream actually right now. All right, okay,
I
Karthik, do
would
you have any?
100% recommend. Yeah.
Great, great, perfect, perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Jenna, for your time today. Thank you so much as well for your beautiful answers, for your valuable advice. We really do appreciate it, and definitely our audience also appreciates it so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so nice talking to the both of you. You guys are doing both so incredible in what you're doing, and this is an amazing platform to be able to help people understand more about this process. I know I so would have appreciated having this when I was in high school. So you guys are going to do great, and always feel free to reach out if you need anything else from me in the future.
All right, sure. Thank you so much for your time, Jenna, once again, and hope you have a great day today.
No worries, you guys too. Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Thanks.